In order for cults to be successful, they have to be good at enticing followers. Not only must they be able to recruit new members, but they must also be able to maintain their allegiance. Typically, conversion involves someone who is vulnerable. That is, someone who has recently lost a friend or a loved one, failed an important exam, or otherwise feels helpless, depressed, or alone. For a vulnerable person, joining a cult can be very tempting, as it often comes with some promise of reward, companionship, peace of mind, a place to stay, and more. Of course, it also helps if the cult has a leader who is charismatic and adept at the art of persuasion. Given the appeal, how can one possibly ever hope to talk a member into leaving? How do you deprogram a cult member? Back in the 70s, deprogramming involved drastic measures to be taken. That is, the cult member would be physically kidnapped and dragged away from the cult. It was an expensive service, costing upwards of tens of thousands of dollars. So not just anyone could ask to have a friend or family member stripped apart from a cult. After being forcefully removed against their will, the cult member would undergo hours of intense debriefing, in which psychological techniques were utilized as an attempt to counter the brainwashing that had been done to the individual while in the cult. These psychological techniques involved educating the cult member, asking critical questions in order to encourage the person to think in an independent way, and trying to provoke an emotional reaction in the person that would help him reconnect with his former life. This part was done by introducing objects from the person's past and having family members share memories of pre-cult life. In essence, you could say it was conducted like an intervention of sorts. Today, we understand that it's highly unethical to kidnap people against their will, so this method of deprogramming is no longer utilized. Though it may be tempting to want to pull out someone forcefully and hit them with a stroke of reality and a taste of the outside world, this method simply isn't the answer. As the old saying goes, two wrongs don't make a right, and so it can be tough to convince someone that their cult conducts unethical practices when you yourself just acted unethically by kidnapping the guy to begin with. The act of kidnapping alone also has the potential to cause a certain level of post-traumatic stress that could be greater than whatever events occurred in the cult, which is obviously counterproductive. In this way, the whole operation could do more harm than good, and the person may decide they want to return to the cult for the sake of seeking refuge. Congratulations, your deprogramming session served to reaffirm the person's desire to stay in their cult by helping them realize the danger of the outside world. So then you might be wondering how else deprogramming can be done. Well, with any change, we know that it's far better to allow people to come to their own conclusions and make the choice for themselves to seek help rather than act on force. Though it may be frustrating to accept, you simply can't control the actions and cognitions of others. From your perspective, you may see a loved one make an obvious mistake, but unless they come to terms with that mistake themselves, there's really nothing you can do, and trying to intervene has a risk of fueling resentment and causing a rift in your relationship. In a way, it's like watching a horror film when the lead character turns a corner blissfully unaware that the killer is right there. You shout at the TV screen yelling, "Don't go in there!" As the viewer, you know what's in store, but you have to sit there and watch the character face the threat anyway. That's when you might hide under your blanket, shielding yourself from the anticipated moment. This you do because you just can't bring yourself to watch. So is there anything that can be done for cult members, or is it entirely out of your hands, like watching a character make the wrong choice in a horror film? Thankfully, you're not completely out of options. Kidnapping and imprisonment may be out of favor nowadays, but there is another method that most families turn to. This method is known as exit counseling. Exit counseling focuses on using psychological techniques towards steering the cult member to submit to a debriefing session voluntarily. The job of an exit counselor is to guide the family of a cult member by introducing them to effective communication strategies. Family members are told not to be judgmental and to remain calm and loving. Otherwise, they'll only drive away the cult member, reinforcing the idea that the outsiders are not to be trusted. The family is taught how to convince the person to consider debriefing in a gentle, non-forceful way. Exit counseling is successful if the cult member agrees to participate in the process. If not, the family must come to terms with the reality of the situation. When a cult member agrees to undergo the process, the psychological debriefing techniques that are used are the same as they were in the 70s. That is, they involve long hours of intensive sessions. Unlike the debriefing process of the past, however, the cult member is free to leave at any time. As we mentioned before, you can't force any person into a specific course of action. For this reason, there's no guarantee that exit counseling and cult removal will work. About 1/3 of deprogrammings tend to fail, and the statistics on the success rate of exit counseling are not definitive. When it does work, former cult members find themselves returned to the outside world, but not without a whole new set of problems. Some people who leave cults can go on with their life after a short adjustment period, while others may struggle for a longer duration. It depends on the level of psychological damage, the type of the cult, and how long the person was in the cult. Those who leave a totalist or destructive cult could experience severe depression or anxiety and have trouble making decisions for themselves once released into the external world. This is because a totalist cult tends to exploit its members' vulnerability as a manipulation tactic to exercise complete control. To do this, some unethical psychological techniques are used, such as through reform, which basically brainwashes individuals. Another kind of cult, known as the non-destructive religion type, uses a different manipulation strategy. These cults attempt to alleviate the feeling of vulnerability by offering spiritual guidance in order to exercise control over the members. While some may move on fairly quickly in post-cult life, others can go through something known as floating, in which the former cult member shifts back and forth between the cult and non-cult ways of thinking and viewing the world. Sometimes they can experience flashbacks. There are also many other psychological and emotional difficulties that former cult members may endure. Some may experience regret for leaving because they now feel meaningless in the outside world, unable to hold on to a job or handle money. The cult may have provided the person with a sense of purpose and community that's now lost to them, and they might not be able to rejoin for one reason or another. Others may feel guilt and shame from past actions, knowing that they've been brainwashed into recruiting new members and collecting money in illegitimate ways. They may also feel guilty for past treatment of friends and family members, or resentment over their cult leaders who may have had them commit crimes or acts of violence against others for some presumed purpose. It may also be difficult for former members to accept their past actions and forgive themselves. Then there's the fear of retribution. If a former member was a part of a particularly violent cult with a leader who threatened the lives of defectors, that person may live with a constant sense of paranoia. In this case, the ex-member may fear chance street meetings with cult members and the very real danger that would accompany this. There are many other situations too which may complicate post-cult life in the outside world, such as if the former member has family still in the cult. Some may have left behind spouses or children, and any attempt at making contact is too risky. If a person was raised in a cult or spent most of their life there, they may lack an understanding of the outside world that would allow them to function normally. The list of problems is practically never-ending, which can increase the difficulty for people wanting to rejoin life outside the cult. Overall, the consensus amongst psychologists for the best way to aid a former cult member with reintegration into society is to provide them with an abundance of family and social support. Be as loving and understanding as you can, and importantly, you must exercise patience. Understand that former cult members may be overwhelmed and terrified, questioning their decision to leave and feeling extremely insecure and fearful. All you can do is be sensitive to this and let the person know that you're willing to listen to their concerns. What would your method of deprogramming be? Let us know in the comments. Now, go watch The Most Evil Cults in the History of Mankind and see if your methods would have worked on their members. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.